To my knowledge, no one in or out of the field has ever been able to cite a game worthy of comparison with the great dramatists, poets, filmmakers, novelists, and composers. That a game can inspire to artistic importance as a visual experience, I accept, but for most gamers, video games represent a loss of those precious hours we have available to make ourselves more cultured, civilized, and empathetic. Roger Ebert. Video games are a relatively new medium, one of the newest out there. However, due to the nature of them, the topic of their legitimacy as an art form is one that often comes up. The quote previously mentioned from Roger Ebert is one side of this constant debate between many highly regarded figures in the industry. He also points out that one obvious difference between art and games is that you can win a game. It has rules, points, objectives, and an outcome. He then goes on to point out that games without a point or rule set become representations of a story, novel, play, dance, or film. On the other side of the argument, Dennis Dyack, president of developer Silicon Knights, states, "Even asking such a question is an indication that our industry is maturing and games are becoming a dominant form of entertainment." He also adds, "The most popular forms of entertainment, TV, music, poetry, books, all went through the same perception evaluation." Peter Molyneux, the legendary creative director for games such as Black and White, Fable, and Populous, says he has no doubts that games tick all sorts of arts boxes and affect culture as fully as any other art forms. So with both sides kind of established, let's look at a few examples and come to our own conclusions.
Basically, he thinks we should move forward with the radiation, and it kind of freaks me out, but it could be another miracle.
There's a story in the Bible where Jesus and his disciples are on a boat. And a furious storm hits the sea, and everyone thinks they're gonna die. And where do you think Jesus is? He's asleep in the back of the boat.
That Dragon Cancer is a 2016 game from Numinous Games. It follows the journey of Ryan and Amy Green as their son struggles with his 4-year battle against cancer. The game acts as the family's own coping mechanism after the tragic loss of their son, Joel. However, it also aims to share the experience with others. Cancer is obviously a very difficult topic to discuss, and the game covers some very serious issues. However, it really goes into the experiences and personalities of the parents. Ryan Green is, after all, a games designer, and so this experience which he decided to share with the world has many of these common video game tropes. Therefore, showing the game can be an experience, but one with many video game elements. Sections of the game involve interacting with postcards written by those affected by cancer, as well as a representation of cancer as an evil dragon in an 80s-style side-scrolling game. Now, the game doesn't necessarily offer any kind of objective for the player. I'm sure Roger Ebert would categorize it more as an experience rather than a game. However, the layering of game-like mechanics and the allowed interactivity of the player in the game suggests that perhaps it is a game, and therefore an art form, about a father and mother sharing the tragic circumstances surrounding their family. In addition to this, the game has a very unique look that sets it apart from the rest. This has resulted in the game winning many industry awards, including the Games for Impact Award at the Game Awards 2016, the Game Innovation Awards at the BAFTAs, and the DICE Award for Outstanding Achievement.
But sometimes the story is written onto us, or it's told because of us or in spite of us, and it reveals our weaknesses, our failures, our hopes, and our fears. You let us tell the story of my son Joel, and in the end, it was not the story that we wanted to tell. But you chose to love us through our grief by being willing to stop and to listen and to not turn away. To let my son Joel's life change you because you chose to see him and to experience how we loved him. And I have hope that when we are all willing to see each other, not for just who we want to be, but who we are and who we're meant to be, this act of love and this act of grace can change the world. Thank you.
I think it's also important to consider the interactivity of games. One point made for the argument against games as art is that once you add interactivity and that element of control into the mix, it ceases to become art because movies, music, etc. don't involve that interactive element. However, the point has been made that some plays have interactive elements that involve the audience as part of the play, so how does interactivity affect the experience? The Mass Effect series is a sci-fi role-playing series developed by BioWare and published by EA. The series is a very story-driven affair about humanity's struggle in a galaxy filled with conflict. One of the major features of the series is the ability to direct the impact and outcome of the story. The player is given a series of predetermined options which can lead to different scenarios and dialogue options between characters. The games are very highly praised amongst the gaming community for having a highly immersive universe and story, and you could say that the options given to the player and the interactivity the series allows makes for arguably the best possible form of art. Next, I want to talk about an area that I find particularly interesting, and that's what many people like to call game photography. This is an area that becomes particularly popular amongst PC players and revolves mostly around games with large budgets, also known as AAA games. In the video game industry today, the majority of big budget developers and publishers pride themselves on showing off their latest graphics in partnership with hardware manufacturers. Good examples of this include EA's Battlefield 1, Ubisoft's Ghost Recon Wildlands, and Square Enix's Deus Ex franchise. What we've seen as a result of this is mostly what resembles photography. This involves the player often manipulating the game using in-game tools or modifications, or even recently hardware solutions provided by companies such as Nvidia or Intel to take photographs of scenic areas in the games, textures, cool moments, and more. Now, what's interesting about this is that it's oddly comparable to standard photography, except the only difference is that it's technically computer generated. However, for many gamers, there's still that thrill of discovery, much like areas such as nature photography. Rather than the art being created, the art is found and captured. Expanding from this, there's the subgenre of machinima. As early as 2001, a company by the name of Rooster Teeth became the first to pioneer the term machinima, which is defined as movies created using in-game engines, short for machine cinema. Red vs. Blue by Rooster Teeth still stands today as the longest running web series of all time, garnering billions of online views and millions in revenue through merchandising and more. This also spawned a community of dedicated machinima enthusiasts who use video games to create their own experiences from art. Popular creators include John C.J. Graham, who even took it a step further and used action figures in conjunction with his video game manipulation to create a web series about two toys who come to life and their vulgar journey through various online communities. So, there are a few examples of what many consider to be games as art through many different interpretations, although it also goes without saying that there are many games that some would consider not art. So let's look at some examples of this as well. Skylanders is a 2011 game from Activision that's described as a toys-to-life action 3D platformer aimed at children. One of the selling points of the game is that it comes with a portable platform that can have action figures placed onto it, which transfers the character of the action figure into the game. Many argue that this combination of toys with gaming is capitalism gone wild, developers cashing in on an arguably unnecessary mechanic as a way to gain as much profit as possible from a market that's easy to produce for. So is that actually art? One journalist, Paolo Perdicini, suggests that if computer games, in their immense variety, have anything in common, that may be their compulsion for efficiency and control. Computer games are an aesthetic form of rationalization. What I interpret this to mean in the context of Skylanders is that much like traditional kids' toys, video games are still a manufactured product that are put under a great deal of control and quantification. Paolo goes on to say that, When we produce artful depictions of our world using computers, we inevitably carry over a cybernetic bias that could reinforce certain assumptions and mindsets. Now, with westernized video game development, that can transfer into capitalistic notions. Blockbuster developers are, after all, primarily in the business of making money, second to making art. Therefore, the idea that a certain aspect of a game has to be profitable is always going to be at the back of the game developer's mind, in most cases at least. Another example I'd like to talk about is Telltale Games. Telltale Games properly formed around 2004-2005. It gets sketchy, but they're well known for what some call interactive experiences in episodic formats. These are better described as games with a heavy focus on limited player involvement, but also with a heavy focus on player choice, delivered in episodes, of course. Some argue their games, for example their latest installment, Guardians of the Galaxy, are simply interactive movies that offer minor alterations to the story due to limited dialogue options. Now this is a valid point admittedly, but it does bring up an even more interesting point. What makes what Telltale define themselves as games, games? Just because the experience is computer generated, does that make it a game? After all, Toy Story is an entirely computer generated movie, and Telltale present their games in a very similar fashion to a TV show in the way they deliver it, giving players slices of the game at a time in an episodic format. One user named Rottweiler on the website giantbomb.com says, "The games do not feel like games at all, but rather a 3-hour-long cutscene with a timed event every now and then." He also goes on to say that Telltale have completely branched out from their point-and-click roots and simplified their games to the point where there is no game. This seems to be a common complaint as well, as the top search result relating to Telltale Games is "Telltale games are not games." So with this all said, what does it add to the argument? Well, some actually still argue that even TV shows shouldn't get the same consideration as movies due to their episodic nature. Author Ekau Eshen said on a BBC Radio 4 debate in 2011 that essentially video games aren't art but rather are forms of entertainment. Most of the things we enjoy in life are entertainment. Lots of books, lots of TV shows, lots of films aren't art. That doesn't make them bad, it makes them really enjoyable. I'd suggest that the things we really consider art are the things that allow us to ask profound questions about who we are, how we live, and the state of the world around us. I think most games don't get to that place, and it's important to see that bar quite high. This brings us on to the whole mobile scene, Android, iPhone, that kind of thing. Now, whilst this is my least knowledgeable area of video games, it's important to ask, can we consider video games art when games like Flappy Birds, Angry Birds, and Clash Royale exist? Can we ask profound questions about human existence from Angry Birds? Even if we look at more console-oriented games, retro classics like Space Invaders and Doom had a very early intention to be entertainment above art. So what games can we consider art? So in conclusion, I think it's fair to say that there are many arguments for and against video games as art. Both sides of the argument have some strong points, and there are many elements of video games to consider, but I think it's up to our own personal interpretation. If you believe something to have an artistic effect on you, or if you see something purely as money-making entertainment, there are different beliefs and thoughts amongst many in the gaming community, and either view is acceptable, to be honest. Anyway, thank you all for watching the first episode of Push to Talk. This is kind of a trial run we're doing, so we're still tweaking things and we're going to work out some future topics for discussion in the future. But if you really liked the video, don't forget to comment down below and like the video if you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to join our Discord server where we'll be taking questions for various video topics such as this, and also you'll be able to come and hang out with us, or follow us on Facebook or Twitter. Anyway, I'm Harrison from HorsePlay. Thank you very much for watching.